Hi everybody, my name is Dugan Davidson and I'm a technical installation specialist with Andersen Window and Door. So today we're out here at this beautiful, almost century-old home in Edina, Minnesota. We're going to be assessing for some new windows and doors. Homeowner really wants to update the look from the exterior and they've had some damage to the interior. So why don't we head inside and start looking at what we got. All right, so we've moved to the interior of the home now. So just as a reminder, when we're going through and assessing these two sets of windows that are behind me here, this is a 100-year-old home. So they're gonna want to be keeping a lot of the same aesthetics and look that we see on the interior here. So as I'm going through, I'm gonna be talking about the trim, be talking about the stool and apron on it, as well as the window itself and what we want to recommend to the customer. So let's start with this smaller double hung here in the corner. And the first thing we want to point out when looking at this window is why in the world would the homeowner want to replace it? Well, the homeowner had some rodent damage going on, as you can see from the bottom of the sill here on our bottom operating sash. Now, this window has some larger decorative interior trim on it. The trim in this instance is actually going to be removed, replicated, and replaced. Got a really nice looking stool and apron at the bottom of the window also, which again will be removed and replicated and replaced to the interior of this unit. So just by looking at this unit visually, other than the obvious damage that we've got going on at the bottom of the unit, if we start looking at the top, just visually from my standpoint, I can see that up here on the head is actually sagging quite a bit. I can see that we're out of level on the side, and I can confirm about that by just grabbing my little torpedo level. Notice that my bubbles are never going to sit in the middle. Same on the side. Not too bad on the top, but quite a bit off on the sides. And if we go down, check the level of our stool and apron, we're quite a bit off to one side here. So what that's going to tell me is right away that the window is now shifted in that opening. So when I'm going to be going through and doing my measurements, we need to make sure that I'm probably undersizing that unit a little bit just to allow for that rough opening that has now changed shape over time. All right, so now we've taken a peek at the single wide unit that we had over here in the corner. We're going to move to the showpiece of this front sitting room, which is their 4-wide double hung combination. So as you can see, we're facing the street on it. This is a real showpiece from the exterior of the home. So when assessing a 4-wide combination like this, the first thing we need to determine is it going to be staying the same as what we see now? Or do we want to maximize the visible daylight for the homeowner on this? And what I mean can be shown by just pulling up my tape measure and noticing the amount of material that I've got between each one of these windows. I've got approximately 7.5 to 8 inches of material in between each one of these units. I can narrow that down to less than 3 if utilizing a factory mull or an on-site mull. By doing so, I'm going to gain 4 to 5 inches of visibility out of each one of these windows. So that's a huge selling point to the homeowner, and I think that's what we're going to recommend here. But before we make that recommendation, let's take a peek at what we're dealing with on these units. As you can see visually, right here, this unit is completely out of square. This opening has completely shifted. The header is sagged. It's completely visible from here. If I go ahead and pull my level on it, I'm going to notice that the bubble is completely off to one side, and I can rock that level back and forth on some points, and it's not even touching. So know that I've most likely got some header sag going on this unit, which is probably impeding the operation of these top sashes on all of these double hung units on them. So now that we've assessed what we're going to do, we're going to shrink this from a 4-wide individual set units into a 4-wide combination and maximize our amount of daylight opening. So in a real world instance, this would likely be a 2-person measure. I would have one person holding the other end of the tape measure for me and having it run across. But luckily for me, I have my handy dandy little laser measure. So by using my laser measure, I can set at one point from the side, get my middle measurement, 106.74. Move to another spot, sure that I'm on the right point. Now I can take my 3 different measurements, and I'm going to go ahead and record those measurements for my horizontal plane. For my 3 measurements, I'm going to find the smallest measurement from those 3, and that is what I'm going to record for my horizontal. So for my interior measurement, jam to jam, I'm going to record 145.39. Now I can clear out my measurements, and I'm going to go ahead and measure on 3 points on a vertical plane. And again, I'm going to record the smallest of my 3 measurements, 56.13. That's my interior measurement, so now we can move to the exterior. All right, so now we've moved from the interior of the home to the exterior. So we're gonna go through and assess the exterior of this same 4-wide double hung unit that we were looking at from the inside. Really start to determine how we're gonna install this unit as well as measure for this unit. So the first thing I'm gonna take a peek at is what we're dealing with for exterior trim. So if we look around the outside of these double hungs, we've got wood brick mold around these. And over the top one of each of these units is a secondary storm window that has been screwed on over the top. So these will be eliminated. They have a much more energy efficient window going into place. And these structural mulls that we've got in place will actually be shrinking down. We're gonna maximize the amount of visible glass on it. But in doing so, likely we're gonna have to reinforce the strength of the header up above these windows on them. So let's grab some measurements here real quick. And because I'm outside doing this by myself, I'm gonna use my handy dandy little laser that I've got with me. And I'm gonna shoot 3 points on the horizontal plane, as well as 3 points on the vertical plane on my brick to brick measurements. And then I'm gonna measure the overall width of my brick mold. So get my laser fired up here. Let's start at the bottom. Let's go on to my second point. And my third point. Okay, so now I have my 3 measurements in place. I can go ahead and record the smallest of those. And then I'm going to move on to vertical. The reason I'm doing these 3 different measurements at 3 different points is I want to make sure that I am recording the smallest of those, because if my opening is not perfectly square, so now I've got my measurements, move my way back over, and record the smallest of those 3. So now that I've got my width and height of brick to brick, I'm going to move on to measuring my brick mold. Making sure that I'm consistent at 3 points. And then recording my 2.5-inch brick mold.
And that wraps up our assessment portion. So after some careful consideration and talking with the homeowners, we decided to go with Andersen 400 series tilt wash windows for this project. We've also decided to go with factory mulled combinations to maximize the amount of glass that's visible, minimizing the amount of joining material in between the windows. So make sure that you stay tuned for installation coming up next.